All right, welcome Maurice in this interview. Very happy to invite you because you promised us to tell something about your work. So my first question is, who are you, what is your role, and what is the organization you are working for?
Yeah, okay. Well, thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here in a digital way. My name is Maurice Jansen. I'm working as a senior consultant at Wepublic. Wepublic is a consultancy based in Amsterdam, working for assignments for cases on communication, reputation, public affairs. And I've been working there for almost 2 years now. And before that, I worked at agencies and at companies on communication and marketing positions. And I worked, for example, at Porto Novelli, that's a public relations agency, for almost 7 years, I guess. And I was responsible for the McDonald's account. So that was very interesting stuff. And I also was responsible for the corporate communications for Albert Heijn, where I worked for 4 years, and that's one of the largest retailer in the Netherlands.
Okay, Maurice, that sounds very interesting. Can you say a little bit more about your work? Because I know you're very knowledgeable in issues management, crisis management, corporate. For us, sometimes it's very hard to understand what it is, what it really is. So can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah, of course. Well, I advise various clients, and it can vary from the Dutch tax authorities to Coca-Cola. And that's what I enjoy most in my work is the differentiation, the different organizations, different markets, different sectors, and different kind of questions and issues I'm working on. And projects are often mixed up as well. So that's sometimes very nice, but sometimes that's a bit difficult too. What I do is most of the assignments are about positioning, about profiling, stakeholder management, issue management, crisis communication, and also the organization of communication. So what is the best layout for our communication department? Those are also very interesting assignments. And projects I've been working on right now, some examples is mapping out social and political issues that can affect the reputation of the organization, or maybe even the operation of the organization, and the associated stakeholder field. So what are the stakeholders on those issues? Other example is formulating a clear profile of an organization, and so that as the way of positioning can be formulating and clear and appealing messages for press relations and other relations as well. So what are our key messages? How can we frame our policy or a new product or new service or whatever? It can also be an example is the layout of the communication department. What is the most effective? How can we be more impactful? And also the development of communication approaches for huge projects, especially projects where there are several organizations or companies involved. So you have really a multi-stakeholder, but also a multi-owner field, and directional communication is needed then.
Okay, wow. And this is all part of what we call the field of corporate communication. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that's right. But corporate communications is, for me, sometimes also a little bit difficult to limit, to stress the limits, because sometimes there are also some branding and some marketing communications involved. Sometimes you are more with organizational strategy, into organizational strategy when you have projects on change management. How can you change the behavior of clients or employees or whatever? So it's, in my view, it's very broad, corporate communications, and then this all belongs to corporate communications in my view.
Yeah, well, I'm very happy you mention all these topics, because all these things are also touched upon in our program, and you make now the link that it's all part of the corporate communication. I'm also a bit curious, Maurice. You also said you were involved in crisis communication. Can you say a little bit more about what you do when you handle this topic?
Sure. First of all, most of our assignments, and especially in crisis communication, they are it's very confidential. So I cannot mention any names of organizations just because you have confidentiality agreements. Crisis communication is, for me, very interesting because of the pace of it, because it has to be done now, and there is adrenaline, there is a huge impact on clients or employees or whatever involved. So it really matters what you're doing, and that's what makes me gives me energy. What you see in crisis communication is that most of the times it's about limiting or avoiding awareness of what is happening, and it's not because it's a secret, but because you want to reduce uncomfortable feelings at clients or employees, or you don't want to warn people without reason for them, and especially also because you want to avoid reputational or organizational risks or damage. So that's the main task, is very often to avoid communications. That sounds a bit weird, but that's what the case is. I can give you one example, and it's a very recently I've done in a very delicate question. It was in youth care, and there was a suspicion of sexual misconduct. So that's very sensitive and very difficult, because you have to deal with children and their parents and employees and whatever. So I was asked for the crisis communication, because what is happening and how can we inform, or do we have to inform people? And you have a very small crisis team then. Of course, there's somebody from the organization who is finally responsible. You have, in this case, it was also HR, there was a lawyer, and there was me. And what you do is trying to get all the facts. That's first thing. And that's very difficult, and it's an ongoing process, because, well, during the process you get more and more information. But first information was, it was only about suspicions, there was no evidence. And maybe there was even more evidence that nothing happened, and also that there may be incitement. So you have to deal with potential risks for the children, of course. You have to deal with the interests of parents, but also of the employees, and also the employee itself who is concerned, because maybe there was no sexual misconduct at all. So what you do is trying to deal with the balancing act for human interest, first of all, but also for reputation, and also from a legal perspective. So you're also connected with the police, of course, and also with labor lawyers. So what you do first is, what are the risks for all the stakeholders involved, and then the reputation risk. But first, what are the risks for the people? So what are the risks, potential risks for the children, for the parents, for employees, for the neighborhood, etc. And then you also have a look at the reputational risks. And that's my part of the job, is to develop scenarios. Is what if we get more information about this and it becomes clear that, or what if the employee is going himself to the press, or what if somebody hears about this issue going on. So you have a lot of scenarios, and my job is then to develop also key messages and question and answer. So in case there is a question, it can be from a colleague, that can be from press or whatever, of a parent. What are our answers? And that's not just a question and answers, but it also gives a sharper view on what is happening and what can we do from a legal perspective, and what will be the impact if we communicate something like this. Another part of my job is monitoring. So fully monitor what could be communicated by whom. That also means social media monitoring, but also in the organization, will people talk about this or not, who knows it already, etc. And then come to a solution. And the solution in this case was that the man who was concerned was fired. And that's very good, because there was a kind of suspicion. So you want, as a youth care organization, don't have any risks at all. On the second hand, there was no evidence, so maybe he was completely innocent. So good guidance is also very important, because this man could also go to the press and tell the press, hey, look what happened to me. There was no evidence at all, and I'm fired. So from all perspectives, you look at communication and how you can deal with that, and how you can give a good guidance to it.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I think it's perfectly explained. I'm in the field of international communication for quite a while now, and usually when you ask communication professionals, what do you do in your daily practice, I get very vague answers, but not in your case. It is very clear, it's very analytical, and I think it all helps us now to grab a little bit what corporate communication is. But what I also feel, Maurice, is what you say and the way how you analyze it, the wording, the phrases, how you deal with people, the delicacy, what you also said, confidential, you deal sometimes with confidential information, delicate issues when it comes to crisis communication. So I also think that also goes part with your role as a corporate communication senior officer, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's what I like also in crisis communication. You have to deal with reputation, with organizational goals, but especially with human as well. Yeah. And in this case, there is a victim, but I don't know who the victim is. There can be children involved, whoever. So it's a very important part was the human part of this project. So that's that makes it very interesting and impactful to me.
Yeah, wonderful. Maurice, are you also willing to share some tips with us?
Yeah. Well, I have a lot of tips, but maybe the most important tip, which is also a tip for myself every day, is at the start of an assignment, and it can be an internal assignment or from a client, it has to be crystal clear what is the goal and what is the mandate and what is the budget. And that sounds very obvious, but sometimes just because it's your boss or it's your client, you start running, or maybe you think, oh, I understand it and I can already start with it. But maybe you're completely in the wrong direction, or maybe the person who asked it is not the right person to ask it. So you have to be very, very eager on having crystal clear who gives mandate and what is the goal. And that helps me every day to think about it. Am I working the right way?
Okay, well, I have to say thank you so much for sharing this with us. Is there another tip?
No, a lot of this, but this is the main one.
This is the main one. Yeah, and we should remember that. And I think that is a very good one for all of us at the start of this, I think, pretty difficult block. But this interview is helping us to grasp it. Maurice, I think it's also good to say that you will be involved in this block. Because when we have the pitches, the final presentations of the block, I believe it's planned on Fridays, 6th November, you will come to Groningen and you will also give your feedback and your feed forward on the solutions the students will present. So that will also be the first time that we meet live, and I'm looking forward to it. And thank you so much for sharing your experience in your role as a professional. Thank you so much, Maurice, from Wepublic.
Thank you very much for inviting me, and looking forward to the next steps.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.